Remember that time Isaiah Thomas got completely screwed over by the Boston Celtics after playing through both a grueling hip injury and the loss of his sister in the playoffs? No? Well, let me tell you about it. What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court. I am Sean Murphy, and today we are going to talk about one of my least favorite NBA stories just because this is something that is near and dear to my heart. Now, I'm not talking about our Isaiah Thomas, the Detroit Pistons Isaiah Thomas, but rather I'm talking about Boston Celtics' own Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah was drafted in the 60th pick in the 2011 NBA draft by the Sacramento Kings, and after making a journey throughout the league for quite a bit, he finally found a spot and made it his own in Boston. He was so good for them, in fact, that he was coming off of his second straight All-Star game, averaging 28 points a game through the NBA season, which for any All-Star is really good numbers, but the context that Isaiah Thomas is just 5'9", and he's averaging almost 30 points a game in the NBA means that this dude is special. His ability to cross over his defenders, his ability to shoot the ball, to run right past them, and to also not be a liability on the defensive end so that Boston could be a strong-seeded playoff team, meant that this guy was simply a star in the making, and he was due for a big payday. In an interview during an NBA Summer League game, Isaiah Thomas was quoted saying, "They better bring out the Brinks truck. They're paying everybody else. I gotta get something." And Isaiah Thomas was very justified to believe that he was due for a big payday. But all of a sudden, tragedy struck in April of 2017 as Isaiah Thomas's 22-year-old sister was tragically killed in a car accident. Understandably, this left Isaiah Thomas incredibly shaken, and it was terrible timing for him and his family, but also for the Boston Celtics, as this landed a day before their very first playoff game. Which, there's never a good time ever to lose a family member, but for it to land during Isaiah Thomas's prime, during the best season that he's ever had, right before his playoff run begins, is simply just tragic. But that didn't stop Isaiah Thomas, as he was seen weeping during the pregame, and he went out and he played anyway a day after the passing of his sister. And not only did he play, but he put up 33 points against the Chicago Bulls in an effort that was a loss on their very own home court. It was a question as to how he was even going to play the rest of the playoffs. It was a question of what was going to happen, because Isaiah Thomas wasn't just playing through the loss of his sister. It wasn't just emotionally where he was injured, it was also physically, as back in March he had suffered an injury that was considered a bone bruise at the time. Now, with that context, the injury was way worse than we thought it was. In fact, Isaiah Thomas said, if I had known the extent of the injury, he probably would not have been out on the court. But with what he was told by the Boston Celtics team doctors, it was a bone bruise. He said, I would have been out on that court 10 times out of 10. I'm playing every single time. If that injury isn't that severe, I'm playing. But the problem is it was way more than that. But we'll get to that in a bit. Because Isaiah Thomas wills the Boston Celtics through the first round and beats the Chicago Bulls in 6 games. And if that series wasn't difficult enough, they then had to play the Washington Wizards, which at the time featured Bradley Beal and a prime John Wall before he had his summer where he completely fell down the stairs drunk and tore his Achilles and completely injured himself after signing a Supermax contract. But we'll get to that at another time, because that's definitely something I want to talk about. But anyway, Isaiah Thomas has to face this difficult squad that the Washington Wizards had. And not only that, but also he had to go out and play on his sister's what would have been her 23rd birthday. And Isaiah Thomas puts on the game of his career, scoring 53 points against the Washington Wizards on the Celtics home court to a cheer and to a standing ovation from the Boston crowd. And the Boston Celtics ended up winning that game and winning that series as Isaiah Thomas carries them to the Eastern Conference Finals to play LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, the thing is that Isaiah Thomas is playing through this really bad hip injury, and the thing is that he doesn't realize how bad it truly is until he gets deeper into the playoffs, and the diagnosis is not good. The injury was diagnosed as a right femoral acetabular impingement with labral tear, which essentially means he really messed up his hip. It was bad. There were tears in his hip, and for someone that is that small, that relies on their speed and relies on their bounce and relies on their hips, is a really devastating injury. And this left Boston in a really awkward position after this season, because you had a player who clearly earned a paycheck, that clearly earned a big payday, that was playing for this contract and was clearly deserving of a max level contract. But on the other hand, Boston also saw an opportunity that they needed to make a change, or felt like they needed to make a change. And so that offseason, they trade Isaiah Thomas and other teammates to the Cleveland Cavaliers in exchange for Kyrie Irving. So Boston, yes, they saw an opportunity to upgrade, and they went and got probably one of the only guys in the league that is better at his position. But on the other hand, it is at the cost of completely screwing over their franchise player that brought them back to prominence and brought them back to relevance altogether. Now, all hope didn't seem lost for Isaiah Thomas, as he was going into a situation where he was going to be able to team up with LeBron James and potentially go to an NBA Finals, which was something that was unforeseen and something that was an exciting new chapter in the career of Isaiah Thomas. But the problem is that it was becoming apparent that this hip injury was just not going anywhere. And when he was actually able to play on the court, he was not the same guy. In fact, he only played a total of 15 games as a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers and was eventually traded at that very deadline to the Los Angeles Lakers, which at the time was a bottom-feeding franchise in the NBA. So within a year's time, Isaiah Thomas went from mourning the loss of his sister, dealing with a bad hip injury, but playing through it anyway, to bring the Boston Celtics to the Eastern Conference Finals, averaging almost 30 points a game, playing like an all-star and all-NBA caliber player, to a backup point guard for the Los Angeles Lakers. It was simply a fall from grace, and it was something that was quite frankly heartbreaking to watch, as we were seeing a guy that had the talent and had the ability to compete with the best of them simply diminish and fall out of the league in the matter of a few years. And at the time of this recording, Isaiah Thomas is still going out there trying to get back into the league. In fact, he just put up 81 points in a Drew League game. 81! Not just anybody can roll up to any kind of game and put up 81 points. It is a chilling reminder that the NBA is simply just a business, and a front office sees a player not quite as a person, but more so a commodity. And ultimately, they're going to throw them to the wayside at once they're getting diminished returns on their investment, especially if it's the Boston Celtics. Now, personally, I think they should have still done something for Isaiah Thomas. I think they owe him a roster spot in this day, quite frankly. I think they deserve that he has earned a second chance in this league, and that if he can truly come back healthy, can certainly contribute to a winning team. However, that opportunity might never come. And this is one of the biggest what-if stories of what if Isaiah Thomas could have stayed healthy? What if he was able to actually play on a winning team? Could have Isaiah Thomas possibly won a championship? What if he was able to hold on for just one more year before Jason Tatum came into the mix, when Jaylen Brown started to blossom? It is simply just something that Isaiah Thomas was not able to hold on for, and his injuries simply cost him a shot at further greatness. And that is one of the most tragic stories that the NBA has seen in a long time. But at the end of the day, Isaiah Thomas is going to be remembered for that playoff performance. He is going to be immortalized for the effort that he put on for that city of Boston, and he's going to be one of the most beloved Boston Celtics players of all time. The sad thing is, Boston just wasn't loving him back, and not in the way that he needed, and not in the way that, quite frankly, Isaiah Thomas deserved. And that is that time of basketball. What do you think about the story of Isaiah Thomas? I would love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Personally, one of my favorite players in the league, and I would love to see him get a roster spot in the NBA. But thank you so much for watching. I will catch you next time from Half Court.